Hello everyone, so I want to read more authors of color, and in order to do this I decided to read a book from each category. So I made a list of categories like literary fiction, romance, stuff like that, and then I found a book by an author of color to read. So let's get started. The first category is literary fiction, and for this I chose Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ning. This book is about Elena, who seems to have the perfect life and the perfect family, but when a single mom rents a house from them, this kind of threatens her perfect life. This has been a book I've wanted to read for a long time. I really liked her other book, Everything I Never Told You, but for some reason I just never picked it up. So this is a good opportunity to just force myself to read it because I know I will like it. It's just one of those books that I'm just have to be in the mood for. The next category is memoir, and for this I chose Memorial Drive, Daughter's Memoir by Natasha Trethewey. I'm sorry if I butcher anybody's name through this. When Natasha was 19, her mother was brutally murdered, and through this pain and grief, she starts to look back on her mother's life and how that shaped who she was today. So she looks back on her mother, where she grew up in a deeply segregated South, and then Natasha's own experience living in Mississippi as a mixed race woman. I'm really sad that I've never heard of this author before because she's a famous poet. She won the Pulitzer Prize, and in 2012 she was named the United States Poet Laureate. This woman seems like she has lived a very interesting and hard life, and I'm interested to get to know who she is. The next category is historical fiction, and for this I chose The Underground Railroad by Colson Whitehead. So this is a story about Cora, who is a slave, and a newcomer, Caesar, comes along and tells her about the Underground Railroad, and so they take the risk and decide to escape. For classic, I picked Beloved by Toni Morrison. This follows the story of a young black woman, Seti, from when she was a slave in Kentucky to when she was a free woman living in Cincinnati, Ohio. And even though she's a free woman now, she's still haunted by her past. This book won a Pulitzer Prize, and I can see why. It just sounds so important, it's an important read that I think will be probably heartbreaking. And I've always wanted to read Toni Morrison's book. I don't think I've read one so far, but I've heard of her. For history/biography, I'm doing this a little different because the book I chose was written by a white woman, but it's the life of a black woman. And that book is The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks by Rebecca Skloot. This book is about the life of Henrietta, who had cancer, and when she went to get treated, they took her cells without her permission, and it became one of the most important tools in medicine. And I really didn't know about this woman, but this woman needs to be learned. They took her cells and they profited off of it, and her family never ever saw any of that money. And the sad thing is, Henrietta was just forgotten. She was buried in an unmarked grave, even though her cells helped so many people and shaped medicine. For romance, I chose Crazy Rich Asians by Kevin Kwan. This is about Rachel Chu, who is about to spend summer in Singapore with her boyfriend's family. But she doesn't know that his family is extremely wealthy, and then she soon finds out that his mother doesn't really approve of her. I do not like romance, but I know race has a lot to do with this book because she's an Asian American. She was born in America, while her family, by the boyfriend's family, lives in Singapore and has a very strict idea of who they want him to marry, and she doesn't fit this. And so that's why I chose this book, because I think it's going to be more than just a romance book, and I like that. For contemporary fiction, I want to read The Hate U Give by Angie Thompson. So this is about Star, who basically lives in two worlds. She she lives in this poor black neighborhood, but goes to school in this suburban wealthy school. So she's like one of like 2 black kids in that school. And tragically, one night she is coming home from a party and her childhood best friend is shot and murdered by the police. And this is heavily influenced by like the Black Lives Matter protests. And even though this is a young adult fiction, I think it's important that everyone read this. I began reading it and I think it is a very powerful read. And I'm glad it's geared towards a younger audience because they need to know the reality. For thriller, I want to read Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno-Garcia. I don't know much about this. I know that it won one of the Goodreads Choice Award books. This follows Numi, who gets a letter from her cousin who is frantically begging someone to help her. That's all I know about it, so I'm excited to pick this up. I love thrillers, so this is one of those categories that I'm most interested to read. For crime, I want to read The Good Son by Yu-jeong. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. I don't mean to butcher it. This is about Yu-jeong, who wakes up from a frantic call from his brother asking if everything is okay. He soon finds his mother's murdered body lying on the bottom of the stairs, and he doesn't remember the night before. I've never heard of this book until I started researching, and it got me intrigued when they say that he is the Korean Stephen King, and I love Stephen King books, so I'm excited to read this. I just hope that, this author is better at endings than Stephen King. For science fiction, I want to read Kindred by Octavia Butler. This is about Dana, who is a black woman in 1976, and on her birthday, she is teleported through time to antebellum South. And the first time this happens, she saves a white boy from drowning and then is transported back, and soon she learns that the reason she keeps going back and forth is to save this white boy because he is a relative. And this sounds so good because it's like science fiction and like historical fiction and like slavery, because she's a free woman in 1976 and antebellum South is just not a good place for her as a black woman. And for nonfiction, I want to read Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race by Eddo-Lodge. This is about the writer's frustration about the discussions of race and racism in Britain were led by people that are not affected by this. So this covers things like the eradicated Black history, which I'm just learning now, a bunch of things that I didn't know before, that my history has been whitewashed and it's all a lie. And it also covers how whitewashed feminism, that feminism's is more geared to white women. We don't focus enough on black women, and that is true because black women face a greater struggle when dealing with feminism and just dealing with life in general. And movements don't focus on that enough. I know this book will teach me a lot, and I'm always trying to be a better ally and learn more. The last category is fantasy, and the book I chose is The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin. This is the first book in the Broken Earth series. This follows Essen, who comes home and finds out that her husband has murdered their son and kidnapped their daughter. And meanwhile, this is going on. Sanzay, I think that's how you pronounce it. If it's not, sorry. The empire that they're living in is collapsing, and so through no sunlight, clean water, and limited supplies, she has to find her family. And I've wanted to read this book for a very long time. I own it, and while researching this, I found out that this is written by a person of color, which I did not know. I need to start paying attention better to the authors, because I'm sure I've read a lot more books from people of color. I just don't know that because I know the popular authors, who they are, but authors that I've never read before or just read a couple, I do not know. And I need to start doing that better. And this book, it just sounds so interesting because it's like a mystery crime thriller, but it's also fantasy. And so I'm excited to read this book, and I heard great things about it. So I'm probably going to read these throughout the year. It's not going to be like all in one month, but I will be documenting it through reading vlogs to keep you updated on how it's going. So that's it for this video. Like and subscribe, and I'll see y'all later. Bye!